Now this is where things begin to get a little bit confusing and interesting. Remember a long time ago up in here another video we talked about the fact that there were two problems that the phone company had. The poor quality over long distance, which they solved by digitizing the trunk lines between switch stations. The other was that you still had to have a dedicated line for each phone call. Well, how in the world do you get around that? And that is through a form of switching that we'll call packet switching. First of all, let's look at switching in general. So switching, remember, if two individuals wanted to talk without the phone system, you would have to have a wire, a dedicated wire from one point to the other point, and everybody would have to have a wire to everybody else. You would have to have today millions of wires. It doesn't work very well, all right? So switching solved that problem, having this switchboard operator. And by the way, I made a little note here. If you ever go through Cle Elum in Washington here, stop by the little phone museum. It's free, or at least it was last time I was there, and it has a lot of some of this old equipment and whatnot that's kind of fun to look at and to read about. Well, eventually, of course, that switchboard operator was replaced by electronic circuits and dialers. So that the dial and then later on the touch tone were capable of doing the switching by themselves, and you needed a lot less human operators. Once you got to this stage, by the way, with the dialers and the push buttons, this is when phone hacking, actually called phone phreaking, comes into play. And this is a really nice 50-minute video. You're not required to watch it, of course, and it's pretty poor quality, but if you are interested in the early days of hacking, this is the one to watch. It's pretty interesting. This link below, by the way, has this picture that you see above us, as well as some other interesting information about these different types of switches. So at this point, everything was still circuit switched. So once the internet came along, we began to introduce the idea of packet switching. Actually, before the internet, we had a lot of packet switching. But the internet is what made it popular. And the phone companies began to pick up this idea of packet switching. Now, packet switching comes in two flavors, and this is where it begins to get a little more confusing. Datagram packet switching and virtual circuit packet switching. Datagram switching allows packets to take different paths. This is what we use on the internet today. So if I send a web page, say, out to you, that a piece of it may take one path, another piece may take another path, and so on. That's datagram switching. Virtual circuit switching means that the same path is used for all packets, and some of the early WAN technologies used that method. Now, that virtual circuit switching can be further divided into two types: switched virtual circuits and permanent virtual circuits. Switched virtual circuits are those that require a call be made, or a connection be connected first, and then at the end of the conversation it is disconnected. Whereas permanent virtual circuits are these always-on type connections. Now, I've put a diagram here to kind of sort all this out. So circuit switch networks, these were the phone company's networks. This is how the phone company worked originally. Packet switch networks has datagram networks. This is what we use on the internet today. And then the early WAN technology were under this virtual circuit network type. Some of them used permanent virtual circuits, some used switched virtual circuits, and many of the technologies could use either one. We're talking about technologies like X.25, ATM, frame relay, and some of those. We'll be looking at those a little bit later on.